by Ford. It says Ford has covered by foot the equivalent of more than 5 times around the world. He has flown over 1 million miles, and in his preaching travels, he has covered more miles than the Pope. He has spoken in many countries, including England, Ireland, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Germany, Russia, South Africa, the Philippines, Thailand, New Zealand, and Canada, plus extensive travel within the U.S. Ford's special preaching emphasis is the Pauline doctrine of justification by faith, made famous by Martin Luther, but still too often missing from modern preaching. It is the good news that makes the heart to sing and the feet to dance, that Christ by his life and death redeemed the world 2,000 years ago, so that now whosoever will may come to God. I hope you understand what you've just read, what you've seen on the screen right now. That here Desmond Ford says that his special emphasis is on justification by faith. Just justification. He says it is the good news that makes the heart to sing and the feet to dance. That Christ by his life and death redeemed the world 2,000 years ago, so that now whosoever will may come to God. That is really, really serious what you're reading. Hopefully as we go here, you will be able to pick this up and understand it as we try to explain it. Going back to our screen now. First of all, we see that the prophet predicted that in the future deception of every kind will come, such as a doctrine that there is no sanctuary. Now, I don't want you to zero in on Dr. Ford, Desmond Ford, because all Desmond Ford did, God allowed Desmond Ford to come out so our attention could be drawn to the broader problem. Because the broader problem, if just Des Ford believed this and he's gone, it'd be no problem. But the broader problem, what Des Ford showed is that this thinking had already crept in among us, and now he was the one that came forth and said, look, this is what I believe. And the other shirt, this is what we believe also. So I want you to understand, the problem, don't just zero in on Des Ford and say, well, now he's no longer part of this church. The very thing that Des Ford believed is now throughout our church. And Des Ford was just the one that came forth and proclaimed it. Let's continue. Let's see what else took place. What else did the prophet predict? Going back to our screen now. Prediction. In 1890, she made this prediction. She says this would be the last deception of Satan. Now, what did the prophet say would be the last deception of Satan? She says, Satan is constantly pressing in the spurious to lead away from the truth. The very last deception of Satan will be to make of none effect the testimony of the Spirit of God. I want you to understand what you just heard, what you've just read. The very last deception of Satan, as he makes war upon the remnant church, would be to make of none effect the testimony of the Spirit of God. In other words, brothers and sisters, his last deception would be to make of none effect the writings of Ellen G. White as God gave them to her. And that was a guide to this church. His last deception would be to make these books, all of these books you see here, of none effect. Now, what do you mean none effect? That means people will have them in their library. You go in their home and you see them in their library. There will be counsel there that they're not abiding by. They don't even read it anymore. How could we read it and believe it and if we were doing the things that we're doing? How could the mandates and the things that's taking place among us be taking place if we believe what was in here? If we believe this was from God, then we would do it. I'm going to read something to you. Testimonies, Volume 5. Testimonies, Volume 5. Let me read something to you, brothers and sisters. I'm reading from page 671. Testimonies, Volume 5. Now remember, the last deception of Satan will be to make of none effect the testimony of the Spirit of God. Look, she says, Testimonies, Volume 5, page 671. She says, God is either teaching his church, reproving their wrongs, and strengthening their faith, or he is not. This work is of God, or it is not. God, this work is of God, or it is not. God does nothing in partnership with Satan. My work, she says, bears the stamp of God, or the stamp of the enemy. There's no halfway work in the matter. The testimonies are of the Spirit of God or of the devil. Now, there's no halfway work. Look, the writings as revealed by God through Ellen G. White is of God or is of the devil. There's no halfway work in it. Some of it cannot be of God, and some of it of her own doing, some way else. No. This work is of God or it is not. Now, our theologians and our professors and what have you say, well, we can determine what's from God and what's from Ellen G. White. Well, let's see what does she say about that. What has God told her about this kind of thinking? She says here, now this is page 691, just 20 pages forward. She says, "And now, brethren, I entreat you not to interpose between me and the people and turn away the light which God would have come to them. Do not by your criticism take out all the force, all the point and power from the testimonies. Do not feel that you can dissect them to suit your own ideas, claiming that God has given you ability to discern what is light from heaven and what is the expression of mere human wisdom." In other words, she said, you cannot determine what's from God and what's from mere human. You see, God has not given you that ability. Continue. She says, "If the testimonies speak not according to the word of God, reject them. Christ and Belial cannot be united. For Christ's sake, do not confuse the minds of the people with human history and skepticism and make of none effect the work that the Lord would do. Do not by your lack of spiritual discernment make of this agency of God a rock of offense whereby many will be caused to stumble and fall and be snared and be taken." Now, if you're looking at this video and you find yourself opposed to what I'm reading, that should tell you something. That you yourself have made of none effect these writings, and that you yourself are a terror. That's simply what it means. Because let me share. Selected Messages. Selected Messages, Book 3. I'm reading page 83. And we're going to read from page 84. I'm trying to be tactful, but brothers and sisters, it's time to tell the truth. Listen to this. The protected barrier torn away. The enemy has made his masterly efforts to unsettle the faith of our own people in the testimonies. And when these errors come in, they claim to prove all the positions by the Bible. But they misinterpret the scriptures. They make bold assertions, as did Ella Canwright, and misapply the prophecies and the scriptures to prove falsehood. And after men have done their work in weakening the confidence of our churches in the testimonies, they have torn away the barrier that unbelief in the truth shall become widespread, and there is no voice to be lifted up to stay the force of error. Now I'm turning over to page 84. You need to get your books. You need to read this. It's the Selected Messages, Book 3, page 83, and I'm now reading on page 84. Now listen what the prophet says, saints. Listen. Giving up faith in the testimony, she makes this statement. "One thing is certain," she says. "Those Seventh-day Adventists who take their stand under Satan's banner." What is Satan's banner? Satan's banner is Sunday. Satan's banner is the keeping of Sunday. "One thing is certain, those Seventh-day Adventists who take their stand under Satan's banner will first give up their faith in the warnings and reproofs contained in the testimony of God's Spirit." What is she saying here? She's saying, brothers and sisters, that as a prerequisite to know beforehand who among us will give up these special truths and keep Sunday, as a prerequisite, we will know them, because they're also, before the event ever takes place, they will not believe in the spirit of prophecy. They will seek to lessen it, to make it a non-effect. Pastors, I hear pastors lowering it and talking about we don't need it, or she was for that time, what have you. Brothers and sisters, whenever you see anyone that calls himself a Seventh-day Adventist that's belittling this, you can know for a fact that's a terror, and that individual is going to keep Sunday. You know that for a fact. Are you hearing me, brothers and sisters? Now, like I said, trying my best to be very tactful, very kind. We are admonished to be wise as a serpent and harmless as a dove, but these are the facts. Now, a lot of cases, saints, we have people that have been brought into this church and have never been taught this information. And so consequently, they are members, and they are members of a corporate structure, and they are tares